wife and I and small business owners saw a great transfer of wealth out of our pockets into the hands of billionaires like Bezos and Gates, and also into the hands of government officials like Whitmer and Newsom. Would you support a constitutional amendment to prevent any more shutdowns from any other alleged Chinese viruses? And also, in your plan, are we going to be abolishing the IRS?
So I'm game for that. You know, you send me that, we'll sign. Look, I think at the end of the day, what happened was it already violated the Constitution, the Fifth Amendment. Because if you take somebody's property, you got to provide just compensation. And I mentioned in the remarks, and you said it eloquently, this was a major transfer of wealth from middle-class people and small businesses to a handful, maybe 6 or 7 major corporations. You know, Apple's market cap is $3 trillion now. Amazon, massive growth, Facebook, all these companies. And you wondered why Facebook was censoring dissent about COVID lockdowns, because they benefited from doing this. You wondered why all the elites were attacking me in Florida for standing up and saying, no, we need to go a different direction, because there were a lot of people that benefited this, and we're still living with the effects of it. I think at the end of the day, we as Americans do have to acknowledge that America handled it wrong. Sweden, for example, handled it right. They kept things going. They made adjustments to protect people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the basics of going to school, working, businesses, all that, you know, that continued. And that's not how people like Fauci in this country did. So what I've pledged is, when I'm president, we are going to usher in a reckoning about the people that perpetrated those policies, so that this never happens to our country again.
Governor Aaron Navarro, CBS News. On energy, where do you stand now when it comes to bans on fracking and offshore drilling?
So I don't support national. I think in Florida, people have kind of misconstrued. We have a constitutional amendment that does not allow offshore drilling, and so that's something that we honor. And so when we're doing that, that is not saying that I think that should apply to Louisiana or Texas and all that. So that will continue, and we want them to be able to do it. And we also want them to be able to use hydraulic fracturing. It's been something that's been very effective, and it's really taken our country to be the world's leading energy producer. But clearly in states like Florida, because we're a coastal state, we've had oil spills, we've put that in the Constitution, our voters did, and that's something as governor that I've followed and respected.
Governor Hampton.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Lisa Kaczynski from Politico. Governor, your spokesperson said online that United Grandmothers were scammed out of money by Trump to pay his legal bills. Could you expand on that, please?
I'm not familiar with that, but at the end of the day, you know, we're here to talk about restoring this economy. We're here to talk about uplifting the middle class. To me, if you ask voters, are they more interested in hearing about that or the process stories about politics? I think that they want to hear about the country's future, and so that's what we're going to do. Michael.
Michael Graham, New Hampshire Journal. The #1 challenge for the businesses in this building is finding workers. And so 2 questions. One, what can the federal government do to use sticks and carrots to get people back in the workforce? And secondly, New Hampshire Republicans tried to pass a work requirement for Medicaid. You have to look for a job or do something productive. They struggle with the Democrats to get that passed. What should the federal government's stance be on that?
So the federal government's stance should be, for able-bodied adults, there should be work requirements for all welfare programs. That works. The incentives need to be get to work. We've tried this in the past, and it has worked. What happened was COVID came. They did the CARES Act, which was $2 trillion, and they were basically telling people not to work. And I think that maybe they thought that you could do that for a couple weeks and everything would be snapped out. But what happened is the CARES Act underwrote lengthy lockdowns in blue states. And so while Florida and Georgia and others were doing it, in fact, I had people come up to me, you know, the other day saying, like, when they got to Florida during COVID, it was like a whole new world. They were so happy and everything. But so we did well. but these other states, and it just, people dropped out of the workforce. And we've had millions of people totally drop out. To go from 98% of prime age males in the workforce to now 89%, that's the difference in terms of finding the workers. So the expectation needs to be any benefits must come with work requirements. I think that that's 100%. We actually are including that in our program. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the future. So that is there. I think that that's absolutely necessary, and we will ensure that that's the case. Yep.
Sir, this is going to be the last question.
Hey, Nick Nehamas from the New York Times, thank you. So this year you had to pass major legislation to address the crises in the property insurance and affordable housing markets in Florida. Why didn't you see those crises coming ahead of time and address them before they got so out of control?
That's a false premise. We did. So for example, we've done property insurance for 3 years, going back to 2021. We had to get what the legislature would do. There were other things that I wanted them to do then that they weren't prepared to. Once the election happened, we had better numbers. We called a special session very quickly and got those changes down. So we've been working on this for a number of years. I think that in terms of affordable housing, we've done more in terms of our programs since I've been governor than any governor has done in terms of funding that. And that was day one. Every budget I did in Florida had full funding for Florida's affordable housing programs, and that was a much big change from what my predecessor did. We have also, and then we did the Major Live Local Act, which was probably the most significant attempt to increase the supply of affordable housing. And this is not like public housing. These are people that are cops, they're firefighters, they're teachers, but if they have to drive an hour and a half to work, that's not gonna, that doesn't make sense for them. And so if you want to have vibrant communities, you got to have at different levels of the economic ladder be able to afford to live. So you're seeing a huge amount of capital flow into that. One of the things that bill did was it overrode some of the draconian restrictions that counties and cities were putting in. I mean, there's a need for housing. You'll hear local people say that. And then it takes years to be able to navigate. So we've created a streamlined process where people are going to go in. I've heard great things. There's a lot of people that are really excited about it. We also have robust home building, and that continued during COVID. But I think part of the issue in Florida is we have intense demand to live in Florida. We are the #1 most desired state to move to anywhere in the country. That's just a fact. And so, you know, in some respects, that's a big benefit because individual Floridians, since I've been governor, the average Floridian has seen their wealth increase more than at any time in our state's history just based on their home values. I mean, some of their home values, and it's not just the mansions in Palm Beach. You know, you have middle-class suburban subdivisions, you know, homes that may have been 3 or 4 years ago, $350,000, you know, those are now all over $500,000 or what. So there have been a lot of Floridians that have benefited from that. On the flip side of it, for new buyers, you know, you need to be able to get into the market in a place that makes sense. And so you've had big demand. Inflation has caused huge problems too because it costs more to build homes. And then with the interest rates, you know, that's made it really, really difficult. You thought maybe there would be some back and forth, like a little bit of a correction. But I think what's happened is the interest rates have gone up so quickly that it's locking in homeowners to their homes because they know they can sell it, maybe make some money, but then they're going to end up in a loan that is going to cost way more with interest. And so it's created a little bit of a stasis, I think, in the homeowners market. But our Live Local Act, it's actually been a model for the country. I've had legislators around that have asked us about it. And but, you know, when you do things right, people respond, and there's a lot of people that want to come to Florida. And I mean, in New Hampshire, I'm running in, and you know, you guys are a free state, but I still have people saying, I may buy a place in the Villages, I may buy a place in Marco Island. All stuff. Okay, you know, look, we welcome it, but the reality is our demand far outstrips, you know, anywhere else, and so we're working hard to keep up with it. I do think with the home building. You know, our home builders have been on fire, but we had massive supply chain issues because of COVID. And so they probably would have built even more homes over the last few years if those supply chains were a little bit better. Yes,
Just
ma'am.
one question.
Sir, this is going to be the last question.
Thank you. I'm just curious, so you spoke about electric vehicles. You announced your presidential run with Elon Musk. Do you have a problem with the business he's doing in China? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, look, I think that I think if you ask him, I think he's acknowledged that we need to do more of the rare earth minerals here in the United States, or at least in countries that are not as adverse to us. So I've certainly recognized that, and I think that that's something that our China policy is going to look to address. That will take time. That's not going to happen tomorrow, but we got to do that. In the meantime, forcing people to do the EVs, I think is a big mistake. First of all, a lot of Americans, they just don't want it. And I think that Tesla creates a really good product. It's not necessarily something that I would be able to afford or would want, but I get people like it. But to make the Fords and the GMs do all this for electric, you are not going to see the demand for that. And I get a kick out of, like, California. They announce, okay, starting in however many years, 4 or 5 years in the future, all new sales in California must be electric. Then 2 days later, they say, all electric vehicle owners, don't plug in your car because we have problems with the power grid. Are you kidding me? I mean, good grief. So let's get real here. So, all right, thank you all. God bless you. We appreciate it.